This video is audio content only. It does not contain any video footage or images. If you are expecting visual content, please be aware. This is intentionally provided in an audio-only format. We recommend listening to the audio rather than watching the screen. Thank you for your understanding. Step into the shadows of Kaidan, where the boundary between the living and the lost is as thin as a frayed rope. These are tales of debts paid in blood, of villages that appear only to those who shouldn't find them, and of family legacies that rot from within. Listen for the rhythmic clack in the hollow and the whispers over the dark water. Some secrets are better left buried, but tonight they have come to the surface. Tread carefully. In these stories, once you pass through, you can never truly return. Chapter 1. Raven's Hollow. The Return of the Hanged. I moved to Raven's Hollow 10 years ago. It all started when my father's mother passed away and I inherited her old farmhouse. The place was tucked deep in the mountains, 3 ridges past the nearest highway. After miles of driving down unpaved, winding dirt roads, you'd hit a valley where the houses seemed to huddle together as if they were sinking into the earth. It felt like a place where time had simply stopped. For the first few days, the locals were friendly enough. They'd drop off baskets of fresh vegetables or help me find my way around the back roads. But there was something off about them. Their smiles never quite reached their eyes. What really started to get to me was the noise at night. Clack, clack. It sounded like someone tapping a piece of wood against a tree. It wasn't the wind. The rhythm was too steady, too deliberate. I asked a local guy about it, and he just gave me a thin grin. "That's just the raven's call," he said. "Legend says that back in the day, they used to hang the wicked down in the hollow and beat the wood until the ravens came back to claim them. People say they still come back every now and then." I laughed it off, thinking it was just some local ghost story meant to spook the newcomer. But a few days later, I found the spot. Behind the house, deep in a grove of gnarled oaks, stood an ancient tree with several frayed ropes dangling from its heavy branches. At the base of the trunk, the dirt was stained in a dark, permanent circle. My chest tightened. It looked exactly like a place where people had been left to swing. Then the strange things started happening. Every morning, I'd find muddy footprints on my porch. Every night, there were more of them. When I mentioned it to the neighbors, they all said the same thing. "The valley is just welcoming you. Don't pay it any mind. It'll go quiet soon enough." Go quiet. They had a look in their eyes like they knew exactly what was happening, but weren't about to tell me. A few nights later, there was a town meeting at the old community hall. I was invited. When I walked in, the elders were sitting in a semicircle on the porch. In the center was a heavy stone pedestal with a framed photo of my grandmother on it. A man who seemed to be the unofficial mayor spoke up. "Your grandmother was a seer," he said. "She was the one who kept this place safe." "Safe from what?" I asked. "From the mouth of the hollow. It was her job to seal the valley with blood so the rot wouldn't get in." I started to laugh. I thought it was some sick joke. But then I heard the heavy thud of the door locking behind me. Men stood up and grabbed my arms. "The ritual has to continue," the mayor said. I fought, I screamed, but there were 10 of them. They dragged me out to that grove of oaks, right under the tree with the hanging ropes. The ground beneath was soaked in black. And then, deep in my ears, I heard that sound. Clack. That's the last thing I remember. When I woke up, it was morning. I couldn't move. In fact, I couldn't feel my body at all. I was looking down at the village from high up in the tree. A frayed rope swayed in the wind right in front of my eyes. A black feather was caught in the fibers. I was the one hanging there now. Years crawled by. I watched the seasons change and the village slowly rot away. The young people moved out, the old ones died off, until only a few houses were left occupied. But I never stopped watching. From the top of the hollow, I looked down on their roofs every single day. One day, the remaining villagers gathered. "We're reaching the end," one said. "We need a new guardian to keep the ritual alive." "What about that guy who just moved into the city outskirts?" another suggested. Right then, the wind picked up. I laughed. The sound echoed through the trees. Clack, clack. The villagers covered their ears. "That sound," one whispered. Acorns split open and black feathers swirled into the air. Deep in the grove, the ropes began to swing. 1, 2, 3. They all started thrashing in the wind. Clack, clack. With every strike, a villager dropped. Their faces turned pale, eyes wide and staring as the breath left them. From the bottom of the hollow, countless shadows began to crawl upward. The ones who had been hanged just like me. They were all reaching out, silent and cold. "The ritual must continue," the mayor screamed, but his voice was drowned out. The next morning, when the state police finally made it over the ridge, they found a ghost town. Every door was standing wide open, and the town square was carpeted in black feathers. After that, Raven's Hollow was wiped off the maps. The roads washed out, and nobody goes near it anymore. But they say on rainy nights, you can still hear it coming from beyond the mountains, the sound of wood being struck over and over. It's the signal of the hanged, the sound of a debt finally being paid. Chapter 2. The House Across the Creek. A Shadow by the Water. It's been 6 months since I moved back to the countryside. After the divorce, I took my young son Leo and moved back into my parents' old place. The small community across the creek used to be full of my mother's relatives, but these days only a handful of families are left. At first, the neighbors were nothing but kind. They'd stop me on the porch to say how glad they were to see me back and ask how my mother was holding up. Their warm welcome helped me start to find my footing again, but that peace didn't last long. It all started the day Leo went across the bridge to play with a little girl. "Mom, I played with Annie today," he told me when he got home. "Annie?" I asked. "Who's she?" He pointed toward the water. "The girl from the house across the creek. She's really good at making lucky charms." I didn't think much of it and just told him to be polite and play nice. But the next morning, a neighbor from down the road pulled me aside, her face tight with worry. "Is your boy playing with the girl from that house?" she asked. "You need to put a stop to that right now." I asked her why, but she just looked away. That family, well, years ago, the mother, her husband, She trailed off and hurried away before finishing her sentence. The more I tried to dig, the more vague the rumors became. No one would give me a straight answer, but they all said the same thing: stay away from that house. Leo, however, became more obsessed with Annie by the day. Every afternoon he'd cross the bridge and wouldn't come home until the sun started to set. "Annie made a lucky charm out of river stones today," he'd say, showing me a pebble wrapped in twine. "That's nice, honey," I'd tell him. "Maybe you can show me sometime." He nodded, but then his face fell. "The other kids won't play with her, though." When I asked him why, he whispered, "She says if they play with her, they'll get cursed." A cold shiver ran down my spine at the word. The next day, I noticed a small bouquet of wildflowers left on the bridge. I reached down to pick up a ribbon that was about to blow away in the wind, and when I saw the name written on the tag, my heart stopped. It said Annie. I went to the local library and started digging through the Old Town archives. 15 years ago, a young girl had drowned in the creek. The report said she had been pushed off the bridge while playing with some other children. The family of the boy who pushed her still lived right here in town. After I read that, Leo stopped playing with the other neighborhood kids entirely. When I asked him if Annie was coming over to play, he looked at me with a strange, distant expression. "She's coming tonight," he said. "She waves to me from across the creek when it gets dark." "What does she look like?" I asked, my voice trembling. "She wears a white dress and stands right in the middle of the water," he replied. "She wants you to see her too, Mom." That night, I was startled awake by the sound of splashing water outside my window. I looked out toward the creek where the moonlight was shimmering off the dark surface. There were 2 figures standing at the water's edge. A young girl in a pale white dress was holding Leo's hand. The moment I screamed his name, they both vanished into the darkness as if they had never been there at all. The next morning, I walked out to the bridge. Resting on the wooden railing were 2 small, identical bouquets. They were tied with matching red ribbons. 2 tiny, handmade tributes sitting side by side in the morning mist. Chapter 3. The Shadow Brother. Curse of the Crimson Stain. I have an older brother named Nathan. He's 3 years older than me, and growing up, he was the kind of guy who was good at everything he touched. It was always understood that he would be the one to inherit it all. My parents' affection, the family estate, the whole legacy. But 10 years ago, Nathan just walked away. He left without a word, taking nothing but a single suitcase. Then, last month, after my father passed away and the probate process began, the lawyer told me something that made my blood run cold. He said, "Your brother is coming home." A knot of unease tightened in my chest. I had a bad feeling about it, a deep, instinctual dread. The day after the funeral, Nathan showed up. He was gaunt, his face lined with deep shadows that hadn't been there before. He looked like a ghost of the man I remembered. But when he smiled, it was the same old Nathan. "Good to see you, kid," he said. "You look well." I forced a smile back, but a question kept gnawing at me. Why now? Why come back after all this time? After the service, the lawyer sat us down. The estate consisted of the house, the surrounding acreage, and a substantial life insurance payout. It was supposed to be split between the 2 of us. But the will contained a bizarre handwritten addendum. The key to this house cannot be held by only one. I didn't understand what it meant. Nathan just tilted his head, but his smile looked forced, like a mask that didn't quite fit. That night, I stayed in the old parlor. The house smelled exactly as it always had, that heavy, damp scent of old wood and earth rising from beneath the floorboards. I looked up and saw Nathan standing at the end of the hallway. He was leaning against a support beam, staring at me with an unblinking intensity. "Something wrong, Nathan?" I asked. "Do you still want this house?" he whispered. "What? No, it's not about wanting it. When I left, Mom told me something," he interrupted. "She said the younger brother would be the next to carry the weight. That's why I came back." His voice had a strange theatrical quality to it. His eyes were dark and clouded, as if something else was looking out through them. The next morning, the lawyer was doing a final walkthrough of the property. He found a sealed wooden box tucked away in the back of the old cellar. Inside were 2 tarnished silver memorial plaques, the kind they used to make for children who died young. One was engraved with the name Isaac. The other said Nathan. "But that's your name," I muttered, confused. The lawyer looked shaken. "These records are 30 years old," he said. "They list these 2 as deceased infants." "But your brother is—" I couldn't find the words. Nathan was alive, and yet his name was already written among the dead. A heavy realization sank into the pit of my stomach. Maybe the person who came back wasn't my brother at all. That evening, Nathan was out on the porch smoking a cigarette. In the pale moonlight, his profile looked unnervingly white. "Hey, little brother," he said. "Are we really even brothers?" The question made my skin crawl. What is that supposed to mean? "The heir to this house is chosen by blood," he said. "You know that. You remember what Mom called it, the shadow mark." He reached out and touched the side of my neck, and I flinched. I remembered being a kid, burning with a fever, and Mom whispering to me, "When the mark appears, you've been chosen." I had forgotten those words until that very second. Nathan pulled back his collar, revealing a dark crimson birthmark shaped like a crescent moon just below his collarbone. "This is the mark," he said. "The curse of this house lives in me." "Stop it," I snapped. "That's just a story." "But is it? Look at your own neck, brother." I reached up instinctively. Beneath my skin, I felt a strange pulsing heat. From that moment on, the house began to change. In the middle of the night, every mirror in the place shattered simultaneously. The cellar door would fly open on its own, venting the smell of fresh, wet grave dirt into the halls. Nathan grew paler by the day, his face twisted in a permanent expression of terror. "I saw him," Nathan whispered one night. "I saw Father's shadow. He's calling me. He says there only needs to be one heir. He told me to bring the boy." Nathan started to laugh, a low, wet sound that didn't belong to him. The following night, Nathan led me out to the old family graveyard behind the hill. A fresh hole had been dug in the center of the plot. "What are you doing?" I yelled. "It's a promise," Nathan said, gripping a shovel. "One of us is the real heir. Father said so. We have to be sure." Under the flickering light of a lantern, his skin looked blue. The wind picked up, making the headstones groan. Suddenly, the ground beneath my feet gave way. As the dirt crumbled, I saw white bone protruding from the earth. It was a skull, and as the lantern light hit it, I realized with a jolt of horror that it bore my exact features. When I came to, I was back in the parlor. Morning light was streaming through the dusty windows. The lawyer was standing over me, looking grim. "Out of the two of you, it seems you're the one who survived," he said. I looked out toward the garden and saw them carrying Nathan's body away. On his neck, the crimson shadow mark stood out vividly against his cold skin. I walked over to a shard of a broken mirror and looked at my own reflection. The same mark was there on my neck, burning bright. And beneath the skin, the name Nathan was beginning to bleed through in faint, dark letters. I started to laugh. I couldn't remember which of us was the older brother and which was the spare. It didn't seem to matter anymore. My eyes fell on an old inscription carved into the wooden pillar of the house. "The shadow cannot hold two." A cold breeze swept through the room, and I heard the sound of the parlor doors clicking shut, locking us in. Chapter 4. Stillwater Cove. The road beyond the map. I was driving down the coastal highway late one afternoon when I spotted a narrow, winding trail cutting into the mountains. My GPS showed it as a dead end, but I had a nagging feeling it might be a shortcut to the shore. I was heading home from a long shift, and on a whim, I decided to turn the wheel and see where it led. As soon as I entered the woods, the air shifted. The sharp, bracing scent of the salt spray faded, replaced by the heavy, damp smell of earth and thick moss. Overhanging branches clawed at my windshield, and the canopy was so dense that the sunlight barely managed to flicker through. The pavement was cracked and crumbling, giving off the distinct impression of a road the world had long since forgotten. After a few miles of climbing, the view suddenly opened up. The ocean stretched out below me, and nestled right against the water was a tiny cluster of houses. There were maybe a dozen old cottages with weathered gray shingles arranged in a semicircle around a small private bay. I felt a strange magnetic pull toward the place, and I found myself coasting down the hill toward the nameless settlement. A weathered wooden sign stood at the edge of the village. Painted in fading white letters was the name Stillwater Cove. It was a place I'd never seen on any map of the county. I pulled over at the entrance of the village, and as I stepped out of the car, the sound of children's laughter drifted toward me on the breeze. Down on the narrow strip of beach, a young boy and girl were standing side by side, picking through the tide pools for shells. They looked to be about 6 or 7 years old. The boy's hair was matted with salt, and the hem of the girl's sundress was soaked through from the surf. When they noticed me, they both looked up at the exact same time. "Where are you going?" they asked. Their voices were perfectly in sync, a chillingly melodic unison. "I'm just trying to find a way through to the main road," I said. "Does this path lead back to the highway?" The boy let out a small, knowing laugh, and the girl pointed out toward the dark water of the cove. "Once you pass through, you can't come back," she said. Then, without another word, They both crouched back down to the sand. I brushed the comment off as a weird local kid thing and kept driving. As I passed through the village, I didn't see a single adult. Every front door was draped with a heavy, braided hemp rope, and small rusted bells hung from the frames, chiming softly every time the wind kicked up. The sound was unsettling, like a chorus of tiny, metallic voices whispering just out of reach. It took less than 5 minutes to clear the village and crest the next ridge, where I finally hit the state highway. When I looked in my rearview mirror, the cove and the village had already vanished behind the trees. Only the memory of those children's voices remained, echoing in the back of my mind. A few days later, after another long day at work, I felt a strange urge to find that road again. I wanted to catch the sunset over that hidden bay and maybe snap a few photos. But when I reached the spot where the sign had been, everything looked different. The signpost was brand new, and the name had been carved deep into the wood and painted in stark obsidian black. Even stranger, the number of houses in the village seemed to have doubled. Down on the beach, the same 2 children were playing in the surf. The setting sun cast a deep, bloody red glow across their backs. It felt like I had stepped right back into the exact moment I had left them. I parked the car and walked toward them. "I'm back," I called out. "Do you kids just stay out here all day?" The boy turned around with a wide, toothy grin. "Yeah," he said, "we don't have anywhere else to go." The girl didn't look up. She was cupping something in her hands, staring down at the water. As the tide receded, I saw something caught in the wet sand, a piece of sea-bleached driftwood that looked like an old grave marker. The girl picked it up and held it out to me. "Is this your name?" she asked. I looked down, and my heart skipped a beat. My last name was carved into the wood in jagged, old-fashioned lettering. I reached out to take it, convinced I was misreading it, but a wave surged up and swept the marker back into the dark water. "Once you pass through, you can't come back," they said together. A cold shiver raced down my spine. I scrambled back to my car, slammed it into reverse, and tore out of there. But as I sped away, the sound of the ocean didn't fade. The air grew heavy and cold. I glanced at the rearview mirror and saw 2 small, dark shadows standing in the middle of the road, watching me go. By the time I hit the highway, the sun had fully set. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, trying to steady my breathing. When I finally reached the main road, I looked back one last time. The sign didn't say Stillwater Cove anymore. In the moonlight, the black letters clearly read, "Waves End." When I finally got home, I kicked off my shoes by the door. As I did, a pile of wet, salty sand spilled out onto the hardwood floor. The smell of the ocean filled the entire house, thick and suffocating. I went to the window to close it, but as I reached for the latch, I heard a tiny, faint voice drifting in from the darkness outside. "Hey, where are you going?" It was the children. Their voices were carried on the wind, right outside my glass. Before I could even think of an answer, the sound of crashing waves began to echo through the hallways of my house, as if the tide was coming in to claim the room. I've never been able to find the road to that village again. But sometimes, in my dreams, I'm back behind the wheel, driving toward that crimson sunset. I see the two of them standing on the shore, waving me in. Once you pass through, you can't come back. Maybe that isn't just a warning. Maybe it's the way things are done in a place like that. Chapter 5. The Crimson Ribbon. The Secret of Blackwood Manor. My wife, Sarah, moved into this house exactly 1 year ago, back in the spring. This place, Blackwood Manor, is an old estate tucked away in a lonely fold of the Appalachian Mountains. For generations, my family served as the keepers of the land here. Now I'm the only one left. When we met in New York and decided to get married, Sarah just laughed and said, "I can't wait to breathe some fresh mountain air. It sounds so peaceful and quiet." I wanted to believe her, but I knew the only reason this house stayed quiet was because of what we were keeping trapped inside. On our very first night as a married couple, Sarah was startled awake by a sound in the hallway. Someone was walking across the floorboards, their footsteps slow and heavy in the moonlight. She whispered to me, asking what it was. I told her the house was just settling, that old wood always groans at night. I forced a smile, but my stomach was in knots. I knew those footsteps. It was the same sound I heard the night the wife before her vanished. The next morning, I found Sarah in the yard, staring up at the gnarled branches of the old apple tree. "Why are there red ribbons tied all over this tree?" she asked. I brushed it off, telling her it was just an old superstition. My grandmother had tied those ribbons there 3 years ago, right before she passed. In our family, it was said those ribbons were the only thing binding a bride's soul to the living world. I told Sarah not to touch them, that it was bad luck. She looked confused, but she let it drop. A few nights later, Sarah told me she found something disturbing. She had been cleaning out the back of the kitchen pantry and found an old framed photograph of a woman. The face had been smeared over with thick black soot. It was a photo of Natalie, my first wife. Her death had been ruled an accident, but the folks in town whispered that a Blackwood bride never lasted more than 3 years. When Natalie died, I found one of the red ribbons lying in the dirt beneath the apple tree. I told Sarah to put the photo back and never look at it again. I told her not to pray for the woman in the picture. She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. After that night, the house wasn't quiet anymore. Sarah started hearing a woman's voice whispering in the dark. One evening, she sat at the vanity and let her hair fall over her shoulders. She looked at me through the mirror and whispered in a low, hollow tone, "You've been waiting for me, haven't you?" I asked her what she was talking about, and she turned to me with a blank expression. "Her name was Natalie, wasn't it? I saw her in a dream. The night I moved in, a red ribbon fell from the apple tree and wrapped itself around my wrist. I felt the blood drain from my face. The night Natalie disappeared, one of the ribbons had indeed gone missing." Sarah leaned in closer. She told me it was her turn now. I went to see an old man who lived further up the ridge, someone who knew the deep history of the hollow. The moment he saw me, he just shook his head. "You brought another girl to that house?" he asked. "The Blackwood bloodline eats women alive." I demanded to know what he meant. He told me that centuries ago, my ancestors had sacrificed a local healer, burying her alive beneath the foundation to appease the darkness in the soil and ensure the family's wealth. Before she died, she placed a curse on the lineage, demanding the blood of every bride who entered that house. "The ribbons your grandmother tied were meant to be decoys," the old man said, his eyes dark. "But you can't trick a debt like that forever." When I got back to the manor, Sarah was gone. I ran out to the apple tree, and there, tied to a low-hanging branch, was a brand-new red ribbon. It was still damp, the fabric soaked through as if it had been dipped in fresh blood. A voice called out from behind me, "Hey, honey." I spun around and saw Sarah standing there. There were dark shadows under her eyes, and she was smiling in a way that didn't reach her face. "Your grandmother was right," she said. "A bride becomes part of the blood of this house. There's no running away now." At that moment, the tree shuddered. A heavy, overripe apple fell to the ground and burst open, staining my boots a deep, bruised crimson. By the time the sun rose, Sarah was nowhere to be found. I looked up at the apple tree and saw two ribbons fluttering in the wind, one old and faded, the other bright and new. They twisted around each other, tangling together in the breeze. The locals say that if you walk past the Blackwood gates at night, you can hear women laughing inside the house. They say that every time a new ribbon appears, another bride has come home to stay. I'm still here, living in the silence, listening to the sound of the fruit hitting the grass. Spring is coming again soon, and I'm sure someone will come calling. They'll offer their congratulations on my upcoming wedding, and I'll just smile and nod. Yes, I'll tell them, our family is growing. The stories shared tonight are more than echoes from the dark. They are reminders that the world has a long memory, and it rarely keeps its secrets buried for long. We walk through landscapes we think we understand, yet we are often merely guests in places that have already chosen their permanent residence. From the hollows of the mountains to the edges of the sea, the past doesn't just haunt, it waits. As you return to the comfort of your own home, take a moment to listen to the silence. Is it the peace you imagine, or is it the sound of something finally catching up? Thank you for joining us in the shadows. Look closely at the things you take for granted tomorrow. You might find a mark you didn't notice before. Sleep well while the silence lasts.